France created the euro to control Germany. Instead, it built the system that stripped France of power. This is how a plan designed to cage Germany turned inward and locked France inside. In 2010, Europe was shaking, markets were panicking, governments were falling, and every camera in the world pointed at one country, Germany, not France. Germany was deciding who got saved and who got crushed. France stood beside Germany, smiling, nodding, unable to say no. This wasn't supposed to happen. France helped build Europe. France designed the euro. France should be leading, but it wasn't. Something had gone terribly wrong. And here's the thing. France didn't lose Europe in a war. It didn't lose Europe in an election. It lost Europe inside a system it designed to control someone else. For most of history, France saw itself as Europe's brain, the diplomat, the architect, the civilizer. Wars had been fought by soldiers, but peace was built by the French. The European Union wasn't just an economic project to Paris. It was a political one, a way to organize the continent so that France could never be cornered again. And for a long time, this worked. France thought in terms of balance, alliances, influence. Germany thought in terms of rules, discipline, exports. France believed that when things got serious, politics would override economics. Prestige would matter more than productivity. But markets don't care about prestige, and a hidden mismatch was forming, one that would take decades to reveal itself. Everything changed in 1989. The Berlin Wall fell, Germany reunified, and in Paris, in London, in every European capital, there was panic. A unified Germany was the nightmare that had shaped European policy since 1945. 2 world wars had been fought to stop German dominance. The entire post-war system had been built on one idea: never allow a dominant Germany again. But now, it was happening, and France couldn't stop it. The Soviet Union was collapsing. The Cold War was ending. German reunification was inevitable. But France still needed a way to neutralize German power. It couldn't use military force. It couldn't use diplomacy alone. So it looked for a leash, and it found one. The real weapon wasn't tanks. It wasn't territory. It was currency. The Deutsche Mark. The mark was stability. The mark was discipline. The mark was export dominance. The Bundesbank controlled inflation ruthlessly. It didn't care about unemployment. It didn't care about growth. It cared about one thing: keeping the mark strong. And because the mark was strong, every other European currency orbited around it. If Germany raised interest rates, France had to follow. If Germany tightened policy, France tightened too. France had learned this the hard way in the early 1980s. The French government tried to spend its way out of recession. Markets fled to Germany. The French franc collapsed. France was forced into austerity, not by Germany, by reality. As long as the Deutsche Mark existed, Germany dominated. Therefore, the mark had to disappear. France made an offer, a grand bargain. You can reunify, but in exchange, you give up the mark. Germany gets its territory back. Europe gets a single currency. This wasn't economic logic. This was geopolitical strategy. France believed that once Germany was locked into a shared system, power would be shared too. The euro would dilute German influence, the same way the European Union had diluted French and German rivalry. Rules could be bent. Agreements could be renegotiated. Politics would remain flexible. But Germany didn't see it that way. Germany saw rules as sacred, and if Germany was going to give up the mark, it was going to write the rulebook for what came next. Germany didn't surrender power, it encoded it. The European Central Bank was modeled after the Bundesbank. It had one mandate: price stability, not growth, not employment, just inflation control. The ECB couldn't print money to cover deficits. It couldn't bail out governments. It was independent from political pressure, and it was headquartered in Frankfurt, not Paris, not Brussels, Frankfurt. France agreed to all of this because France assumed that when things got serious, these rules would bend. Politics would intervene. Leaders would negotiate. But Germany was building something different. Germany was building enforcement, and the trap was quietly being set. The Maastricht Treaty laid out the rules for joining the euro: 3% deficit limit, 60% debt to GDP ratio, no bailouts clause. On paper, these were just boring numbers, but numbers are weapons. France looked at these criteria and thought, these are guidelines, flexible, negotiable. Germany looked at these criteria and thought, these are laws, absolute, permanent. The euro launched in 1999 under German logic, and discipline was locked in permanently. At first, it looked like France had won. The early 2000s were brutal for Germany. The economy stagnated. Unemployment spiked. The euro was expensive for German exporters. newspapers. Newspapers called Germany the sick man of Europe. Meanwhile, France seemed fine. Growth was steady. Confidence was high. French leaders believed the cage was working. Germany had been tamed. But Germany wasn't tamed. It was adapting. And that adaptation would change everything. In 2003, Germany launched Agenda 2010, the most painful set of economic reforms in modern German history. Wages were suppressed, pensions were cut, unemployment benefits were slashed, labor markets were made brutally flexible. The political cost was enormous. The Social Democratic Party nearly collapsed. Protests filled the streets. But Germany did it anyway. Why? Because Germany couldn't devalue its currency anymore. Before the euro, if German exports became too expensive, Germany could weaken the mark. Problem solved. But now, the exchange rate was fixed. Therefore, Germany had to lower costs internally. It suppressed wages. It boosted productivity. It turned itself into the most competitive economy in Europe. And France did nothing. This is the moment the euro stopped being a partnership and became a sorting machine. Before the euro, France had a safety valve. If the economy slowed, if exports became uncompetitive, France could devalue the franc, make French goods cheaper, restore balance. It was painful, but it worked. After the euro, that option disappeared. French exports stayed expensive. German exports became cheaper every year. The gap widened, and because France couldn't devalue, French industry started to bleed. Slowly at first, then faster. The euro wasn't neutral. It amplified differences. For Germany, the euro was too weak. German productivity was so high that the currency made German goods a bargain. For France, the euro was too strong. French productivity wasn't keeping up. French goods were overpriced. One currency, two economies, and the system had no way to correct the imbalance. Same rules for everyone, but the rules rewarded only one player. Factories closed, jobs disappeared, regions that had built cars and steel for generations went silent. France ran trade deficits year after year, not because French workers were lazy, but because French costs were locked in, and German costs were falling. The state tried to cushion the blow. It spent more. It hired more public workers. It kept unemployment benefits high. But the rot continued, and because France couldn't adjust through currency, it adjusted through debt. The euro gave France something dangerous: cheap borrowing. Because Germany was in the euro, and Germany was disciplined, the entire eurozone looked stable. Interest rates fell. France could borrow at rates it had never seen before, and it did. It borrowed to fund pensions. It borrowed to fund public services. It borrowed to delay reform. Debt masked the problem. For a while, everything looked fine, but cheap. Money doesn't fix competitiveness. It just delays the reckoning. And the reckoning was coming. Greece collapsed. Then Ireland. Then Portugal. The euro crisis exploded. And suddenly, the hierarchy became visible. Bailouts were negotiated. But Germany set the terms. Austerity, cuts, reforms, structural adjustment. France couldn't object, not publicly, because France needed the euro to survive. If the euro collapsed, French debt would explode. The franc would return, and it would collapse immediately. So France stood beside Germany, smiled, agreed, and the illusion of equality died. Germany wasn't Europe's partner anymore. It was Europe's creditor, and creditors don't negotiate. They dictate. There was something else, something almost no one talked about. Target 2. The Eurozone's internal payment system. Every time money flowed between countries, the system tracked it, and over time, a massive imbalance built up. Germany accumulated claims, over €1 trillion. France, Italy, Spain accumulated liabilities. They owed Germany, not directly, but structurally. If anyone tried to leave the euro, the system would collapse. Germany would lose its claims. France would face a bill it couldn't pay. Everyone was trapped. Germany was trapped by exposure. France was trapped by weakness. And the system froze. This wasn't unique to Europe. It's happened before. Every time you lock exchange rates and remove adjustment mechanisms, the same thing happens. In the 1930s, the gold standard turned a recession into a depression. Countries couldn't devalue. They couldn't adjust. The rigid system crushed them. In Latin America, currency pegs to the dollar caused crisis after crisis. Argentina in 2001. The pattern is always the same. Fix the currency. Remove flexibility. Wait, the strongest economy wins. Not because it cheats, but because strength compounds when there's no release valve. The iron law of fixed currency systems is this: the most productive economy dominates politically, always. France miscalculated, badly. France assumed politics would override economics, that when things got serious, leaders would sit down, negotiate, bend the rules, that prestige and history and diplomatic skill would matter more than trade balances. But they didn't. Markets don't care about history. Rules enforced by markets don't bend. And in a system where adjustment is impossible, economic reality becomes political reality. Germany didn't need to threaten anyone. It just needed to be more competitive. And once it was, everything else followed. Germany didn't cheat. This is important. Germany followed the rules, strictly, religiously. It didn't break the deficit limits. It didn't print money. It didn't bail itself out. It did exactly what the treaties said. And it won, because the system rewarded discipline. The euro wasn't rigged in the sense of secret deals or conspiracies. It was rigged in the sense that its structure favored the player who could adapt without external adjustment. Germany could suppress wages internally. France couldn't, or wouldn't. And that difference decided everything. So what happens now? There are only three paths. First, federalization. Turn Europe into a real federation. Shared debt, shared taxes, fiscal transfers from Germany to France, the way the US transfers money from rich states to poor ones. This would work, but it requires Germany to give up control and France to give up sovereignty. Neither will agree. Second, slow decline. The current path. France stays in the euro, loses competitiveness year after year, builds debt, fragments politically. Germany grows stronger. The gap widens. This is sustainable for a long time, but it ends badly. Third, breakup. Someone leaves. Maybe Italy, maybe France. The euro collapses. Debt explodes. Banks fail. Depression follows. This is the most likely endgame, but no one will choose it. It will be forced by crisis. France tried to cage Germany. It tried to dilute German power by locking Germany into a shared system, and it worked, briefly, because Germany was weak. But systems don't stay frozen, they evolve. And the euro removed the one tool France needed to stay competitive: currency adjustment. Without that, every structural difference compounded, every productivity gap widened, every wage advantage became permanent. Germany didn't need to break the rules. It just needed to follow them better. And in a system with no escape, the strongest player doesn't negotiate. It simply wins. France feared German power, feared tanks, territory, domination, but it should have feared German productivity, because in a locked system, power doesn't come from force. It comes from discipline, and discipline doesn't negotiate. It compounds. The euro didn't prevent German dominance. It perfected it. France built a cage for Germany, but the cage had no door. And when the structure settled, France was the one inside. And the longer France stays inside, the harder it becomes to remember there was ever a door.